Verne, appreciate you taking the time. You're the founder, CEO of Scaling Up, a global executive education and coaching company with 260 partners on 6 continents, founder of Entrepreneurs Organization with over 18,000 members worldwide, including myself, author of bestsellers like Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, The Greatest Business Decisions of All Time, and Scaling Up, which has won 8 major international book awards.
One of the questions I often ask my audiences is, do you have a friend who's doing so much better than you and you know they're dumber than you? It's because they caught the right way.
Verne, appreciate you taking the time. I know you're a busy man, so I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat here. You're what I think one of the most brilliant entrepreneurial minds of your generation. Your book, Scaling Up, was very impactful for me. And I have it pulled up here. I don't have a physical copy because I'm an audiobook guy. And Scaling Up was impactful for me, along with Entrepreneurs Organization. So for context, for background, you're the founder, CEO of Scaling Up, a global executive education and coaching company with 260 partners on 6 continents, founder of Entrepreneurs Organization with over 18,000 members worldwide, including myself, author of bestsellers like Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, The Greatest Business Decisions of All Time, and Scaling Up, which has won 8 major international book awards, and many other achievements. So thanks again for taking the time, Verne.
You got it, Raj. And as we were talking about,
is there anything
No. And, I like to, with entrepreneurs, just jump right into the content. They don't need a bunch of my background and all that. Yes, my dad had a very, very successful company with his partners, which, by the way, I think is a good lesson. Intact teams that launch companies scale much further faster. So I literally was on the phone this morning with a longstanding client of ours in India, whose father's got a new way of making concrete. They've got a $100 million factory they're opening up next. And they want to talk about, what's the team they put together. And the key is the father's bringing over the team from their other manufacturing operations that they've been in business with for 70 years. And having that intact team, even my partner who runs our global coaching organization, John Ratliff, he sold to a $2 billion company. They then obviously blew up the place, which is a lot of times what acquisitions do with mid-market companies. And John's been able to recruit back almost entire team now to lead our global coaching organization. So I like to think about it like Ocean's 11, or 12 or 27, whatever they end. All you want to do is get the old gang back together and decide which bank you want to rob next. The other thing that we talked about this morning, just since it's fresh, is he's going to need to hire about 70 employees over the next few months to scale up this factory in India. And there, they can't really pull people from their other facilities. And so the key for any of us that are scaling is to find a fishing hole, kind of a strange fishing hole where you can fish for talent. So from the very beginning, when I first launched what was called Gazelles, now Scaling Up, I knew we were going to be running events and all of that. And so my first few hires and subsequent hires have all been out of Marriott headquarters. We launched in Ashburn, Virginia. Marriott's there in the DC area. And in fact, Donna, who today essentially runs my life and my whole speaking organization, is ex-Marriott. Michael Dell drew all kinds of employees he needed to make computers from Kodak in Rochester, New York. He heard they were laying 10,000 people off. And so he went up there, hired a few, brought them to Austin, Texas. Once they had a good time in Austin, better than the weather in Rochester, that became then his consistent referral source. So we really encourage entrepreneurs to keep the team together, especially if they're going to do their second or third venture, and to find a good, strange fishing hole that they can consistently get talent out of. So anyway, my dad was able to do that. They were a group of guys that were ex-engineers at the Titan missile program. They launched a rocket ship of a company, and then they lost it all in the 73 recession. They got in a cash crunch because a customer owed him about $500,000, which was a lot of cash flow in the late 60s. And it really emphasized the importance that you've got to stay on. You can get by with decent people, decent strategy, decent execution, but not a day without cash. And then went on to help build a $12 million company while I was in college, launched the Association of Collegiate Entrepreneurs, then YEO, now EO. And today we're at 283 coaching partners as of this morning, helping companies scale up. So that's kind of the background. And let's dig into what are some of the things I think entrepreneurs should be looking at for 2024 and beyond.
Sure. So you touched on the people, cash, strategy, execution piece. Do you think those four pillars that you mentioned, and you mentioned, you're working with a company in India. I think a few weeks ago you were in Europe working with some other clients. Do you think those four pillars are just consistent across the globe, regardless of which country you're in, which company or industry you're working in? Is it the same four pieces?
Yeah. And that's why, a lot of our competitors like to make stuff up. They want to create their own 6-box framework or this, that, or the other thing. Our people, strategy, execution, and cash came out of both Jim Collins' research as well as IDEO's research. When they really looked at the 100 companies they launched and another 100 they funded, they wanted to see what was more critical: people, strategy, execution, or cash. It's a foundational four that matter no matter where you launch a company. What's different is what is the most critical at this point. One of the things I do with each of the audiences, from Australia to Asia to the Middle East, where I was just recently with EO, to Europe and the US, is figure out right at this moment, where is the constraint? People, strategy, execution, or cash. It varies by region. Some places they've got a real cash challenge. The Middle East, cash was a big one because they don't have access to the bank lines of credit. It's not easy to get those bank loans in that region of the world. And so that was a much more critical leg of the four-legged stool than it was in some regions where it's an absolute challenge to get people, like in Australia. They're just really lacking the talent they need to support their scale-ups. But what I thought was interesting, Raj, is that IDEO asked which of those four mattered most in scaling their successful companies. And what they found was two things. One, all four mattered equally. So it's like a four-legged table. So you've got to get all of them right. But they found a fifth that actually mattered more, and it's market timing. Because I self-publish, when I found that research, I went in and changed and added that to our work. And at the end of the day, the market makes you look smart or makes you look dumb. And one of the questions I often ask my audiences is, do you have a friend who's doing so much better than you, and they're dumber than you? I say it tongue in cheek, but it's because they caught the right wave. I mean, right now, there was a company yesterday, something Walk the Runway, that simply added to their quarterly call that they are really moving into AI, and their stock jumped tremendously. My next article I'm writing for Chief Executive Magazine is AI plus A player. That is the winning combination. And so right now, if you're not figuring out how AI is going to play out in your industry, you're going to get killed by somebody in your industry who does. So you've got to ride the wave, and it can make you look smart or dumb.
When you say AI and A player, I'm assuming the way you're viewing AI is as a tool. So it's not replacing the people piece, it's helping with the execution piece. Is that correct?
Yes. And my favorite book right now is called Power and Prediction. It's written by 3 professors out of Toronto. And in fact, this morning, literally in Fortune magazine, they're at their Brainstorm AI conference. And I thought it was stated very beautifully. There's really 2 uses of AI. One is to drive efficiency. And it's really an assistant. It's like an extra employee for each of your employees. So as you're seeing, it's increasing the ability for programmers to program by 25, 50, 100%, by customer service reps servicing customers. We've got a client, COE Distributing out of Pittsburgh, that sells office furniture. It's not Google or Facebook. They're selling office furniture, but they've got some beautiful AI engines that really take the pressure off the team in answering customer questions in terms of availability of certain office furniture, whether it's in stock or not, kind of thing. So first, it's really an efficiency tool for every one of us. The second is it's an innovation tool. And that's the area that people are using less of. But what I think is interesting is all other technologies up to this point help us become more innovative. This is the first technology that can create on its own. And in some cases is ahead of us. At our CEO summit we host each year at Harvard, last year, one of the Stanford professors said, hey, a group of their professors were wrestling with an issue that required a new protein. And they turned to AI, and AI created the protein. We're wrestling with fusion right now and trying to control fusion. We get control of fusion, all of our energy challenges are taken care of. It now got announced a few weeks ago that AI was able to control the fusion reaction in a way no humans have been able to figure out how to do. And so efficiency and innovation, giving you ability to predict and power are really the two uses for AI.
In your experience, Verne, have you seen a tool similar to AI that really changed the way companies operate? For example, maybe 20 years ago or 30 years ago, it was Microsoft Excel. Like, have you seen this type of transformational tool?
I think all of us have. Clearly, I scaled ACE and YEO back when all we had was faxes. I mean, we didn't even have computers yet. I remember I got my first Commodore 64 that I was using to start keeping track of things as I launched the Association of Collegiate Entrepreneur. And man, when email came along, the pace with which you could communicate versus having to send faxes or telegrams improved dramatically. So, but this is the first technology that's actually able to create on its own. And that's different. That is different.
Makes sense. So personally, I'm using AI to increase my own productivity. I haven't implemented it within my organization. And I feel like as an entrepreneur, I struggle with execution sometimes. And I'm seeing that pattern as I talk to more and more entrepreneurs. For yourself or for some of the other entrepreneurs you work with, do you have any tips, tricks, maybe frameworks to help with the execution piece aside from what's mentioned in Scaling Up? Or maybe we can expand on some of what you mentioned in Scaling Up.
Yeah, well, I think first of all, hire a 15-year-old. They get this technology much better than we do. But a couple of I'm actually somewhat serious about that, but being very specific. And we just hosted Ginny Rometty, who's the former CEO of IBM, a couple of weeks ago on our virtual learning event. And she started something very innovative when she was at IBM called P-Tech, where they're actually identifying very promising 16-year-olds. And then while you're finishing high school, you're paired up with a local community college and you start learning your programming skills and earning your badges between, ages 17 and 18. And when you graduate, if you have completed certain badges, you can be hired directly by IBM. Now later, may those students go on to get a college degree, but she really emphasized that, particularly with these new technologies, some cases you go to college, you're going to fall behind. This is something that young people get. But to be very precise, I've got a young EA in the Philippines, Jean, through a company called Virtual Hub. They're actually a Scaling Up client. Jean is spectacular, wicked smart. And I've got her on ChatGPT and getting up to speed on those technologies. So I can just say, hey, here's what we're looking for, go to work. By the way, one of the latest uses, we just did it last week, is, and we should have done it before we released 12 Habits of Valuable Employees, we used AI to test the titles. And AI came back, it was very precise. that we should not have put the number 12 in the title. We should have called it The Habits, and gave us back other really thoughtful insights. The second thing that we're really encouraging companies to do, and this is what COE Distributing's done out of Pittsburgh, is they have partnered with the local University of Pittsburgh's data analytics department. And you want to look at, most university colleges don't have an AI department yet, but they have a data analytics. And those professors are looking for real world projects for their students to work on. And so the first project J.D. Ewing had him work on, and by the way, it costs him $10,000 a semester. It's a donation he makes to the class to kind of cover expenses and those things. They were able to precisely predict, that's one of the views of AI, where he should put his next warehouse. They didn't just say in Houston, Texas. They said in this building at this intersection of highways in the Houston, Texas area. And that's where JD is. They actually have built algorithms now that are predicting what would be the hot new designs of furniture they should release in 2024. And then the AI is actually designing the furniture, creating the images, creating the videos. They have the avatar that actually can then deliver. This is all being done with AI, and its ability to predict, like Netflix uses AI to predict what movie is likely to be successful. It's in the 80 percentile, depending on the product line, its accuracy in predicting what's going to be the hot new look, the hot new color, the hot new design, based on all kinds of data that none of their people could ever pull. So kind of last to that point, I'm like, you know what? Good artists borrow, great artists steal. And so we're partnered with a data analytics professor, Shua Gong at Harvard, and her class is going to lead an AI initiative for us at Scaling Up. And Harvard's not allowed for us to pay them a penny. And so we're going to get quite a bit of, young brains at Harvard focus on a specific AI initiative that we're launching within Scaling Up. So those are a couple of options.
Those are first of all, amazing use cases for AI. And I really like the point about reaching out to colleges, universities, and trying to see if there's some sort of partnership you can work out. It truly sounds like a win-win. And that's probably going to be my next step after this call, to be honest with you. I really like the idea. It sounds to me like AI is something that you're really focused on and speaking a lot about in 2024. Are there some other trends that are on the horizon that you're keeping an eye on, or some other important points that you're having companies focus on for this year and beyond?
Yeah. And by the way, I'm not the only one. One of the things I admire about Mark Zuckerberg, and it's something that we teach, and I want to remind all the listeners, you don't really have a strategy if you haven't named it. That was one of the key things Hubert Joly said in his turnaround at Best Buy. He's now teaching at Harvard. He actually taught in our CEO Summit last August. And so Mark Zuckerberg last year named his strategy, nothing fancy. He called it the Year of Efficiency. And, as you wander around, you're like, hey, what are you working on? Well, is that going to get us more efficient? And as a result, they popped the valuation of Meta, Facebook, from about 200 billion to 1 trillion. He added 800 billion in market cap to Meta last year. The beginning of this year, January 12th, he announced the focus for this year is all in AI. And so he's making AI the focus in 2024. But to your question, we're really, because inflation isn't under control, it's why the stock market has been taking a huge hit this week and last week with the numbers that are coming out. Inflation's here between now and the end of the decade. So we're really getting companies focused on pricing strategies and compensation strategies. And compensation is really just pricing internally. And if you don't get your arms around, because employees are wanting to be paid more. I mean, I can't go out to lunch for, I swear, what is cost twice what it did just a couple years ago. The prices have gone up tremendously. Food costs and all of those things just to live. I just got my property tax bill here for my place in Boulder. And so there's tremendous pressure on wages. It's one of the reasons why for employees, you better be an A player. That's why we wrote the book, 12 Habits of Valuable Employees. You've got to increase your own value to the company. And then if you can be an A player and add AI, now you've got the productivity combination that allows you as a company to have a lot less people, but they're paid more instead of a lot more people paid less. So your compensation strategies and your pricing strategies are critical. If not, I'm speaking to the DEO group, the Dentist Entrepreneurs Organization, in June, and those dentists have seen their margins crushed over the last 12 months. And so that's my specific topic from the stage is pricing and compensation strategies. And we wrote a book called Scaling Up Compensation that I encourage all the listeners to read.
When it comes to pricing strategy, you've previously put out there good, better, best, which I think is a great framework. Do you have a good, better, best type of framework for that internal pricing when it comes to employee compensation?
No, not as much. You can do it in terms of offer packages that you would put out to certain candidates. That way you can see what their mix is between, time off that they want, 4-day work week instead of 5 versus what is the monetary component. So yes, you can blend offers that way, but the comp strategies are more around making sure that you have very wide pay bands. The big issue as you scale is employees come in and they ask for two things. One, boss, I need more help. And you start throwing people at the problem. And the second one is they want a career path, which is just code for how am I going to make a lot more money here at this company? And if the only way to make more money is to move up into management, you got a problem because nobody needs managers in the 21st century. This is replacing managers. That's why companies are cleaning house of all of that middle management. As they've said, we don't need people working on work. We just need people working. So then what you've got to do is make sure that, like a professional sports team, do all the quarterbacks on the team make the same amount? Do all the right tackles make the same amount? Do all that? No. It really is based on measurable performance. And the delta between your starting right tackle, your second string, and the person warming the bench, that can be 100x, 1,000x, delta kind of thing. And so we think you need at least 2x. So for instance, we have a client, Allied Printing, John Summers. Again, it's not Facebook or Google, they do commercial printing. Their customer service reps start at about market. What a customer service rep would make in Connecticut in a commercial, kind of company. But they've got the opportunity to make twice as much. But there are very, performance measures along the way. Same with somebody managing or leading a project, just getting a print project. They start in at about market, but they have the opportunity to make twice the market. And their salespeople start in at 60,000 and can make up to 600,000. There's a 10x between the bottom and the top performers. And when John went out into his factory, he said, whoa, it's even there. He says, I have a position called a cutter. Once it's printed, it's got to be cut before it's bound. He says, I got a guy that can do the work of 10 cutters. And that's the point. One great employee can replace 3 good. And we know that in programming or cutting or printing or even as CEOs. Last year, Fortune looked at the best performing companies, and the delta in performance between the best companies and the average was 2.8. And so you've got CEOs performing 3 times better than the average. They deserve the much greater compensation. So the short of it is you got to get out of your head that this is what a position is worth. You can start there, but you need a path where you end up with less people paid more, then more people paid less.
I appreciate you sharing the printing company example, because when I thought of treating your team like a sports team, I've always pictured the Meta, the Google, or more, let's call it cutthroat environment. But using that printing example, I can see to where this can really apply to any company. You mentioned that, you wanted 2x versus 100x or a 10x delta between the lowest paid person and the highest paid person in that position. How did you come up with that 2x number? Or why do you think that might be the sweet spot for most companies?
All the data just pointed to that. And, one of the pioneers was the Container Store. Again, they're a retailer. They sell waste baskets and closet organizers. It's a kind of a frontline position. And Kip and Garrett used to teach for me at that MIT program that I founded for EO. In fact, I'm headed up there tomorrow with the graduate program, Gathering of Titans. And they early on had a value that was 1 great equals 3 good. And they said, you know what? Let's just pay our retail employees twice what they would make in any other retail store. Let's just take compensation off the table, but let's train them so well, 250 plus hours versus typically 8 in retail, so that they're 3 times more productive in delivering on revenue per square foot and profit per square foot and per customer visit and all of that. If you've really got the right kind of customer service person in the store, sales associate, man, when you walk into the store and you want to buy just one thing and you leave with a lot more because you've got the real solution you need, that requires a much higher paid, better skilled person. And so it started with a belief that 1 great employee can replace 3 good, so we can afford to pay them twice as much. And if you can earn twice what you could really in any other company in that position, we think that's delta enough. Now, Costco, if we were very specific, Costco crushes Sam's Club in any metric you want to look at. And their people by position are paid anywhere between 40 and 80% more than what they would make at Sam's Club. But their performance is 3x. So they're not quite twice. They're 40% to 80% more. So I think as long as there's a decent delta over industry average, you've got a chance to attract and retain, a higher quality person, which by definition, they're generally easier to lead. They self-manage, and they're more the A player that you need to be successful.
I appreciate you sharing that. One last piece there, or one last question there before we kind of wrap up the show. I have a final question as well that I think might require some thought. So when we're talking about this compensation piece, are we structuring it like a bonus where if you hit certain metrics, you're going to be bonus to where you might make 2x versus, the next person who's maybe not performing as well as you? Or is it your base compensation, or just a combination of the two?
Yeah, at Allied Printing, which we feature in the Scaling Up comp book. And by the way, we have 100 mid-market companies in there that are not Facebook or Google. They're, not playing, but they're companies like us that we can identify with. John's, it's a combination. Their base pay allows you to get twice, and it's not a bonus. It's based on performance. By the way, it's a fairly easy measure. You get promoted as a customer service rep, and make sure you give various titles. Start with beginner, to wizard and maestro. We give that example in the book. It has to do with the size of the gross margin of the project. The more important, larger print ongoing customers, they don't need 2 customer service reps. They just need 1. But that client brings in considerably more gross margin dollars than some of the smaller clients. And so it's generally tied to the amount of gross margin dollars of printing that you're handling. And that's where you're really gaining your measure of efficiency. And if you're keeping that customer happy and making sure their print job is done correct, those two key people, the customer service rep and the print lead, then you deserve that compensation. Then on top of very fair pay, they have a company-wide bonus that's paid out annually. And your percent of the bonus is your percent of total comp. So if you're making more as a customer service rep, you're also getting a bigger piece of the bonus. So it's a double win. It's a double incentive to really increase your capabilities and your level of service and your ability to interact with people and solve problems and all of the stuff you need your people to learn to do. But then John does something very interesting. He only pays out half the bonus. The other half, the other 50% vests over the next 5 years, 10% a year over the next 5 years, creating these future buckets of payout that you only receive if you're still at the company. And so it's a beautiful retention strategy. And the question becomes, but aren't the employees upset? And John's not paying interest on that. Are they upset that John is sitting on 50% of their bonus each year? And what John explains to him is, look, the worst thing that can happen to a well-performing team is to lose an A player. It's the worst thing you could do to devastate a team, is to lose one of your best people. Now, everyone else has to carry their load. It demoralizes the team. And so his people appreciate that the design of their comp plan is such that the better performing stars are more incentivized to stay than they are to leave. Let me finish with one last story, and then we'll get to your final question. So I want to come back to making sure that every entrepreneur listening to this, every CEO, has named their strategy for 2024. Like Top Gun, Maverick named that mission Dagger, and each of the 4 teams was Dagger 1, Dagger 2, Dagger 3, Dagger 4. So my final example, and I know it's of a large company, but I highlight it because if they can do it, you can do it. Laxman is the new CEO of Starbucks, and Howard Schultz has gone through, 3 other CEOs. And what I appreciate, and I went ahead, not that I'm giving a stock recommendation, I went and bought some Starbucks stock because of it. But Laxman said our 2024 and beyond strategy is called our triple shot reinvention strategy. So first of all, he gave it a name, and it's a play on being Starbucks, triple shot reinvention strategy. And he says we have 3 priorities. Now, I want to give this perspective. This is a $36 billion global company with lots of problems and lots of opportunity. Yet Laxman has boiled it down to 3. He said, first, we want to add 35,000 locations between now and 2030. You might call that a big, hairy, audacious goal. No, notice it's not a revenue number. It's not a number of customers. It really is emphasized in their unit of one economics. Perspective, Raj, that's 100 locations every week between now and 2030. Said number 2, to help pay for that, we want to find $3 billion in savings. Now, on $36 billion in revenue, that means he wants to improve margins by 8%. And that's exactly what we encourage entrepreneurs to do. Rather than lose 4 points of margin because they scale, add 4 points. That 8 points of additional margin, in their case, $3 billion on $36 billion, is what he needs then to help fuel number 3, which is by 2025. So that's a short-term goal. He wants to double the income of his baristas. He realizes the constraint to scaling, especially if you're going to add 35,000 locations up from 21,000 he's got now, he's going to need baristas. And he's effectively agreed what we've just discussed. He needs to find a way to double their income between now and 2025. And so he's got a short term, he's got a medium term, and he's got a long term. And then what's nice is as you're in your daily huddle, what are you working on and what's in your way? The question is, hey, is that either going to open more stores, help us save $3 billion, or figure out a way to double the income of baristas? If you're not doing one of those 3 things, then I don't know what you're working on. and it provides great focus to that global organization. Every entrepreneur listening to this has to provide that same clarity. And that really is the essence of mastering the Rockefeller Habits. I brought that book back. Its 22nd anniversary edition came out last Tuesday. That's the book everyone should start with and have every employee read. Scaling Up then is kind of the master's class, if you would.
Got it. And I do appreciate you sharing. That's a lot to digest. I would love to ask more questions on that, but maybe another time. The final question I have for you, which I like to ask every entrepreneur on the show, is what is your hole-in-one? And your hole-in-one would be your greatest piece of advice that someone can implement in their business or personal life today, to start moving forward towards their goal or whatever that end vision may look like.
Yeah. Well, I think we go back to I.B. Lee, who was the coach to Charles Schwab and John D. Rockefeller, the namesake of my first book, and all of those great industrial titans. And what he taught them, which is at the heart of our work, is that before you go to bed at night, make a list of the 6 things you've got to do tomorrow. And the key is you've got to put them in order. You have to know what number 1 is. Now, I've added to it, sleep on it. Often when I've slept on it, my idea of what number 1 is changes the next morning because of an insight I get why I'm sleeping. But the key is, if you can set a theme for every day, and if every employee knows that no matter what happens today, here is the most important thing we each need to get done today, then you're going to see performance soar. And that's why the daily huddle, which all of our competitors poo-poo and don't emphasize, which is at such damage to entrepreneurs and growth companies, that quick sync up every day, like I do with my team, and everybody knows this for today, including myself, is the single most important thing you can do. Now, you have much better clarity knowing what this is if you've got a clear, we have what's called vision summary, vision for where the company's going, strategy, like what Laxman's laid out at Starbucks. But while you're trying to figure that out, just get something important done. Raj, it may be for you to say, I don't care what else happens today. I'm going to take a few minutes, look up the local university or college, find out who the data analytic professors are, get an email address for them, or have your assistant find your email. It'd be Gene, go find out, who are the analytic professors in town. I've already made that decision with Harvard. Get their email address, and let's write an email or reach out to them today. And everything else is a rounding error if you determine that, hey, that's the most important next thing I need to do.
Verne, thank you so much for sharing. I think, first of all, you've already outlined it for me, but I think that's going to be very beneficial for everyone else listening, watching as well. Really appreciate your time. For anyone that's interested in learning more about you, your organization, your books, I was going to say they can just type Verne Harnish in a search engine, but do you have any particular link you'd like them to go to?
Yeah, our job to be done is scaling up, particularly valuation. So just go to scalingup.com. Remember the name of the book. You'll see the pictures of all the books, and next to them, all kinds of free links to the growth tools, 28 languages. We have a free mini course. It's free. And how to, get started with scaling up. It's a legitimate course. All kinds of other free chapters you can download. Look, this is very missional for me, Raj. And so it's just important that no entrepreneur suffer what my dad did in ultimately losing his beautiful company just because of, some things that maybe he didn't know. So anyway, lots of free stuff at scalingup.com.
Thank you, Verne. Appreciate your time. We'll be sure to link Scaling Up in the show notes. Have a good one.